All right, Drew here with Uncommon Entrepreneurs, here with Andre Crabb, and a true uncommon entrepreneur living down here in Puerto Rico. And in today's episode, we're gonna dive into his background and unique skill set and so forth. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you.
So we've known each other for over a year now or so, and have had some very enlightened conversations over that time, for sure.
We've had some good ones.
Because we're all about that idea of like the mindset of things and understanding, consciousness and mindfulness, right? I know you're a big meditator as your deal.
Yep.
So we have a lot of subjects to cover, but you've moved to Puerto Rico, right? You're down here, so we'll get into kind of your rationale behind that, and the system down here, and then your story of like how you came up to now that you're working in some amazing projects and have your hands with some interesting businesses, and then we can we'll go over a few other topics too. But so maybe to start, like let's just give the audience like some background on like where you come from and kind of, starting from there.
Sure. So I guess my story starts in high school, where I didn't know what I wanted to major in when I went to college. And I was good at math. I was good at engineering, like physics, those kind of classes. And I hated history and English and anything where I had to write papers. So my parents suggested, why don't you talk to some friends of ours and see what they do for work, and maybe you'll find something you like. And eventually I found that I liked computers. And okay, I'm going to study computer science in college. So that's what I ended up doing. And I worked for an IT company for a little bit, installing computers and printers and setting up desks.
Nice.
For a construction company, actually. And interned with them, which was my first real job besides Subway. And then from there, ended up going to community college for a couple years, transferred to UC Berkeley, was there for 2.5 years and studied computer science, got my bachelor's. That was my major. This is the real fast version of the story, by the way.
Sure.
And then graduated, worked in industry for 3 years as a mobile developer.
Nice.
Decided,
in Silicon Valley?
In Silicon Valley, in
nice.
Oakland. In Oakland. The Valley would typically...
In the hood.
In the hood. There you go. It's beautiful, man. I loved Oakland a lot. Worked in industry there for a few years, after which decided this isn't the life I want. I'm unhappy.
Sure.
Just general life circumstances. Something needs to change. Decided to leave the company. I was working for Pandora at the time.
Got it.
Left them. Got a job at a company based out of Utah that let me work remote.
Nice.
Worked from home, and from home. At this point, home became the world, and I became a digital nomad. And for 2 years, I traveled the world working remotely for this company in Utah.
Nice.
And it was fantastic, man. I had some great adventures, great stories, met some great people. And when I did, that's when I got introduced into just the world and the journey of entrepreneurship. And ever since then, I've been kind of going after that dream, that goal of starting your own business and creating something that exists beyond you and something that's yours, and not working for somebody else's dream,
Yes.
And I left that company a year ago, moved to Colombia for a month to kind of figure things out.
Sure.
Decided to move in with a few friends that were also entrepreneurial minded, and we decided Puerto Rico was going to be the place.
Cool. So let's is good stuff. So on the digital nomad front, let's maybe rewind a little bit, because I can totally relate. I worked 10 years in corporate America, lived in Iowa, didn't travel a lot, had the burn to want to be a digital nomad, have jumped off the deep end for the last 3 years in that, and it's been amazing.
Yep.
Right?
That's a great
So that's
journey.
why we can relate on a high level for sure. Tell us a little bit more. Like, was that like that transition, that jump? Like, how has it been? Like, not having like necessarily a home in the world be your home. Give some context to that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So that jump was a huge decision for me. For some people, it might be a quick, easy thing. Oh yeah, I'm going to go do this, and off they go. For me, it definitely wasn't, because you get to a point where you like the security and the comfort that you have, especially if you have a well-paying full-time job, job security. You're like, why would I leave this?
Yeah.
And is it worth the risk of going to another company and, traveling the world and not being in Silicon Valley, right?
Sure.
For my situation. So it wasn't an easy decision. And I'm fairly indecisive in general. But if there's a big decision and it's something I know I want to make, I take my time to really think it through. So I did. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos of how do you make hard decisions and all this stuff, and finally came to the conclusion that I'm doing this. Like, I don't care what else happens. I'm going, And that's just a personal decision, right? Everyone's going to have their own reasons.
Sure.
So it's just you got to understand yourself and why you want it, and the pros and cons, what that means for you to go, and what it means for your personal growth.
Yeah. So where have you been in that time?
Yeah. So I started in, of all places, never thought I would have gone to Bolivia.
Wow.
But that was the first country I hit. I did 3 months in a row to start: Bolivia, Ecuador, Costa Rica.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun. And then since then, where else have I been? Colombia, Mexico, Italy, all around the States. Colombia multiple times.
For sure.
I should say. Yeah, it's been fun. I still haven't hit like Asia, Southeast Asia. I would love to go to Japan. So that's still on my list. Bali.
It's coming up soon, I bet.
It's not too soon. But
yeah. So in this whole time you're working that job you were referring to?
This whole time, yep, I'm working for a company called iFit, based out of Utah.
Got it.
Working full time, man, 8 hours a day, working remote. And it's crazy, man. It hit me. There's a couple events where, you're in this apartment in Costa Rica looking over the ocean, and you're on the top floor and you see all these trees, and you're like, this is a Friday night and I'm having a cigar with a buddy of mine. This is my life. Or you're in Italy and you're like talking to your coworkers on Monday, and they're all talking about what they did over the weekend, and they're fixing up their houses and raising their kids. And you're like, I went to Venice for the weekend. It's wild, man. It's so cool though. It's really cool. But you also talked about community, not having a home.
Sure.
And that's actually a big reason why I stopped traveling.
Interesting.
Now, I do want to mention that when I traveled, a lot of it was with a company called Wi-Fi Tribe.
Okay.
And the purpose behind Wi-Fi Tribe is to have that community while you travel.
Got it.
And I met some fantastic people in Wi-Fi Tribe. A lot of them are still going, and they've been going for years. And the founder, first of all, is an amazing person. And one thing that is very special about him and what he creates within Wi-Fi Tribe is the community, because they have a special interview and selection process. So that when you enter this community, you're going to land in Bolivia, the middle of nowhere, you've never been, and you're going to be around cool people that are like-minded, people that are similar, right? So that was really nice. However, when you move countries when you move a country, totally blabbering here, when you change countries every 30 days, when your friends change every 30 days.
Sure.
That starts to wear on you.
Yeah.
So after a while I was like, I need to figure me out, and I need a constant group of people around me to do it. So I'm going to...
So is that why Puerto Rico?
That wasn't why Puerto Rico specifically, but that was why I stopped traveling.
Got it.
I didn't really know about the entrepreneurship community down here before I moved.
Got it.
But I was pleasantly surprised when I arrived.
So how did Puerto Rico come on your radar on that end?
Yeah, man. When I decided to stop traveling, there were a couple friends that I decided to move in with. And we were going to start a hustle house where we move in, we're going to all be entrepreneurs. They already were. I was starting that journey. And we're all going to get our businesses going, and we're just going to focus on this. And, we're going to be around like-minded people all the time. So I said, hey, I'm in Colombia now. Come down and meet me, because we can live here for 6 months on a visa, and we'll just get going. We'll rent a house here. It's cheap. It's easy enough to just move here and get going. And that was the plan until one of them, well, we realized the visa thing would actually be an issue because you can only stay 180 days out of the year.
Got it.
And so we would have to keep moving. So that was a problem. And then a friend of ours in another community recommended to my roommate, Tom, he said, why don't you check out Puerto Rico? Because it's in the States. It's a territory. You don't need a visa or anything.
Sure.
And they have some pretty nice tax benefits. So he was sold. And so we said, well, all right, sounds good to us. We're just going to go along with it. And for me personally, it was a no-brainer too, because I'm half Cuban. I love the culture, the salsa dancing, the food, the music, the weather, all of it. So for me, it was a no-brainer.
That's great. Okay. So how has the transition been here now? How would you describe it to somebody that's out here wondering?
Ooh, the transition now has been it's been good, like I'm so glad I made this decision, The transition, I guess it depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from the States, like it's not really like a foreign country. Everyone speaks Spanish and things are, I guess, a little older, not as maintained as well as that we know. But the transition, you can just show up and that's it. You just show up, right? A friend of mine, one of his friends came down to check out Puerto Rico for like 10 days. And he's actually getting an apartment, like he's signing a lease while he's here. Because he came and he's like, no, this is cool, I'm staying.
Awesome.
So the transition's not bad. The cool thing about the transition is instantly your network changes. And there's some really cool entrepreneurs and businessmen and the whole uncommon community here that you're starting. That is the type of people that now becomes your 5 average people you spend the most time with, right? That whole idea, so that just changes all of a sudden, and that's cool.
Exactly. Yeah, that the 5 people that add up their income, divide it by 5, and I bet you that's your income type mentality. However, I think taking it a step further is that same idea, but 5 people with like that have the same mentality, have the same friendships, have your spiritual side of things, right? And so you found that whole package here. Talk a little bit maybe more about that community and the impact it's made on you.
Yeah. The entrepreneurs here, it's not just all about the finances. It's not just all about your income. You meet people that are successful in multiple areas of their life. Right. And you meet some people that are like, wow, I've never met someone like you before. And it's impressive how you do what you do. Like Christian, a friend of ours. Yeah. Right. One of the most mentally rock solid people you will ever meet. And you're like, I didn't know people like you existed, but like now I know you and I'm inspired and I want to kind of learn from you and incorporate some of what you do into what I do. Right, you kind of balance out. You kind of raise your standards when you see people around you that kind of embody things that you admire, right? And then there's people that come fresh after you, and so now they're the kind of new blood, for lack of a better word. Sure. And now you can be one that's teaching these people and talking to people, and not just that, but also when you leave and go back home or you talk to some of your old friends. Now you can be someone that's kind of teaching them what's possible. Sure. Right.
That's good. I can relate on many levels on that front. So that's interesting. So let's pivot. Let's talk a little bit about what you're up to now and, what gets you excited and so forth. But like what projects you're working on and start with that.
Sure. The first project that I started working on seriously when I moved to Puerto Rico was my mental health. And that's something we've talked a lot about. It is interesting, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because that is something that I work on actively every day. Sure. That to me is above everything else. If you're not maintaining your mental health, it's kind of the mentality of if you're not growing, you're dying. Sure. Just about anything. And I think it's the same with your mental health and your mindset. And so I see that is definitely a project for me that I prioritize, and it's in my calendar. I meditate every day, you know. That's also a big reason why I moved here, why I stopped traveling. I was like, I need to work on me, and I can't do that if I'm traveling every 30 days, you know? So that's something I work on every single day, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. For business projects, you introduced me to my business partner maybe 8 months ago now or so, and his name is George. He runs Coin Observatory, a very successful crypto trader.
Yes.
And
look him up.
Yeah, look him up. We started a business together selling technical indicators. So when you trade, when he trades, he only looks at the stock chart.
Got it.
Doesn't really look at the news as much and uses technical analysis to base his decisions. Technical analysis is the process of looking at a stock chart and deriving your own conclusions just from the chart itself. And so our indicators look at chart data and spit out numbers or draw some lines on the chart to make it easier for us to make those decisions and to understand what's going on.
Automating it.
You're kind of automating the technical analysis. It's exactly right.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then before that, so I mentioned I quit my job before I arrived here, and I was a mobile developer. So after I arrived in Puerto Rico, I started my own business to be a contractor as a mobile developer. And I got a client in Miami, and I'm working for them part-time, which is fine. It's plenty. And that I started, I still have the same client, just one client. No need for more, really. I might change clients out, or if my business grows, I'll just let them go and do my own thing. We'll see.
That's interesting because I think that phase is pretty typical in entrepreneurship,
Yep.
where you're having a stable base to then be able to do a more risky thing like build with coin observatory, etc. But with the higher upside, right? And where your interest level lies. So that's intriguing. Okay, so how's that partnership worked? How's the process been of that transition so far into kind of self-employment?
With my client or with George?
No, with George.
Yeah, it's been good, man. We met. He was like, we talked about what we could potentially do. I joined his community, and I was like, I like what you're doing. It's cool. I'm also a programmer. If you're working on anything, let me know. And he was like, hey, let's grab lunch. So I was like, okay, this is cool. We sat down and kind of talked about what he does and, a strategy he has. And he kind of had these ideas with it. He said, dive into this one platform and learn their language, their coding language. And if you can code, like a basic RSI indicator, then like a divergent indicator, then, try that. Because I'd never seen this platform before, it was new to me. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go try that. So I went home, tried it, played with it for, I don't know, a week or two. Can't remember. We got lunch again, and he was like, yeah, man, this is pretty cool. It's pretty good. So then we started working on our first indicator that we worked on together, which is a strategy that he's developed with his team for a while. And, we obviously finessed it and created it as its own thing, its own indicator. It evolved, right? And that's what he uses still to this day to make trades. And then we built a couple other ones, that other indicators that are wanted by the community, right? This platform we're on is relatively new, so it's called TradingView, and TradingView is relatively new, and so there's opportunity to build. They're basically like apps, like a micro application for this platform. And so you build it and people will see it and they're like, oh, I use that approach. Maybe I'll buy this indicator. Or maybe they're like, oh, I don't know what this approach is, but that indicator looks sweet. Let me learn what it is,
Sure.
or whatever.
Yeah, good business model. Interesting. Okay. So good. I guess maybe is there any other projects and so forth you're kind of working on at the moment?
Nothing as dedicated as that.
Okay.
I am working with Anand, who owns the space we're in. You had him on the show earlier, and helping him with some code for basically a strategy for him with what he trades as well. I started to play around with a business of putting up a course online to help people write their own technical indicators, teaching them how to do that, since I think it's a growing industry and something that more and more people are going to want to do. As more and more people learn how to program, and of course, as crypto grows and just the finance market in general, people are going to go into like the algo trading more and more. I think that's going to become more popular. So teaching people how to do that, I think, is going to be an interesting opportunity. And then I've been thinking about resurrecting my old blog and bringing that back up, which is around mental health, and starting a community around that, and teaching people the process I kind of discovered when I meditate, and helping people on their own journey, because it's a struggle sometimes, and it's even worse if you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And if I had somebody to teach me, just like anything else, just like business, just like anything, if you had somebody to teach you, you would go a lot faster. Right. And that's something I would love to see, is people going through their own personal growth journey faster and more guided, and less trying to figure things out on their own,
So let's talk more about that. The process that you've taught yourself that you want that's worked well for you, that you want to teach people. Just give us some more kind of like context behind maybe somebody that's watching the significance of it, and then what you'd recommend.
Yeah. It's something that's obviously tricky to convey in words.
Sure.
We've talked about
like a
lot of this before. Yeah, like the part of your brain that screws with you emotionally existed before the part of your brain that creates words existed, right? So all these feelings, like putting words to them is kind of tricky. If I had to describe it, it's kind of like a mix between a meditation style that I learned from Joe Dispenza and Teal Swan, which I guess you could say are influencers in that space. Plus, there was a book I read called It's Not Always Depression, which is really good. And they talk about a type of therapy where you need to express and relive the memories and the emotions that you're holding in that made you the way you are. And they've actually, I heard, they use this a lot on people with PTSD. The ones that relive and like allow themselves to go through that again, get better faster than those that try and suppress it and keep it down. And I think that's the case in general with most people. Not as extreme with PTSD, of course, but what I've realized is as you keep your negative emotions in and you push them down, they get stored in your body in some way, shape, or form, as stress, as anything, just negative energy, and you can hold it for years. And this does happen as a child, as a baby, all the way through today. It probably happened yesterday to everybody, because everyone has negative events in their life, So I would summarize the approach that I've learned is you're basically releasing the negative emotions that you're storing and the negative energy that you're storing. And the crazy thing to me was, 6 months ago when I, really started trying this process out, I felt like a physical sensation of like an uncomfortable sensation fizzling out in my body. And I was like, what just happened? That's crazy. I did it over and over and over again. And after a while, I realized that was a permanent release. Like that one that just happened. This was, a few months ago. I was like, that was a permanent one. Like that feeling that I carried around every day is gone. And that was crazy. That's when I was like, I can tell people this and they're going to think I'm crazy. But I was like, I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to keep going because that's just, you feel so much better afterwards.
Yeah, I think this theme for sure can, might on the surface not seem like an entrepreneurial important part of it. However, your mental health, as you're saying, and your ability to maintain consistency is so vital. And there's so many forces in today's world with so many notifications and different things that are vying for your attention, that your ability to focus and be present in the now is more important than ever. And so I applaud you, and you've definitely inspired me to go down this path of, taking this in almost on faith on the surface of its importance. And then once you start to go and do, mindfulness practices, you realize, like, what have I been doing my whole life, right? And so that has helped by us getting out of our bubble. And I'm curious if you can relate with, growing up where you grew up and then now being down here with these more free thinking individuals that are on this frequency. It kind of like allows you the environment to do it versus you might not have ever picked up the practice if you didn't first take that leap to Bolivia or whatever.
Yeah. That's actually interesting you mentioned that, because I started meditating when I listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast before I ever left Silicon Valley. And Tim Ferriss puts it in a really good way. He says, if you had 2 hours to chop down a tree and you were given an axe, would you, and like your axe is a little dull, right? Would you chop down the tree for 2 hours? Or would you spend the first hour sharpening the axe and then only spend an hour chopping down the tree? And I was like, that just makes sense, right? That just makes sense. And he said, meditating is sharpening the axe. So back then when I started meditating, it was exactly what you said, of just getting out of the bubble, getting out of the notifications, away from the technology, it's me time, right? It's just time for myself, which a lot of people don't do. They don't prioritize themselves. They don't prioritize what they need, and everybody needs time to themselves. So I was doing this when I was still in Silicon Valley, and I felt the difference. I felt my mind was calmer, and then I got out of the habit. And I was doing this back then it was like 5 minutes a day. And like that was tough, or 10 minutes was tough, man, but it still helped. And eventually, I forget what it was, but I broke the habit. I got out of it, and I could feel I was a little more on edge on a daily basis, on a regular basis. So I got back into it eventually when I started traveling and like started really going down the personal development rabbit hole, which is what it is. But you're right in that you kind of have to take it on faith at the beginning, that someone just tells you, like, this will help, you should do it. And you're like, no, that's too woo-woo for me, like meditation and all this stuff. Like, no, but then you get into it and you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, kind of wrapping up the conversation, appreciate you coming in. You definitely are a big part of this community. So where could somebody find you, like, if to follow you, etc.?
Yeah, I've got a website, andrecrabb.com, CRABB, 2 B's. That's just like an online profile for me. It's nothing big, but you can connect with me there, and that's probably the best place to just shoot me an email or something. I'm resurrecting my old blog, like I said. That's theambitiousme.com. So people want to check that out.
We'll put that in the link below.
People want to check that out, go for it.
Cool. Well, yeah, great
Facebook,
times,
WhatsApp.
For sure.
Whatever.
Great times. For sure.
Thanks for that, man.
Yeah, talk soon.